There are people who enter your life like a passing moment, and then there are people who change the gravity of your entire world. You may not understand why you feel drawn to someone. Maybe it isn't their beauty. Maybe it isn't their words. Maybe it's something deeper, something invisible. The kind of connection that makes distance feel meaningless, silence feel heavy, and even the universe seem too small to keep two souls apart, because some people have a pull you simply cannot escape. And maybe that is what you are to me. You are a gravity I never planned for, a force I cannot explain. No matter how far I try to go, no matter how much life moves around me, something inside me keeps returning to you. As if every road, every moment, every piece of the universe quietly knows where I belong. Some connections are not created by chance. They feel written into the stars. And when someone has that kind of gravity, even the universe can't escape their pull. There are some people you meet and then forget, not because they were unimportant, but because they simply passed through your life the way a cloud passes across the sky. You remember them for a moment, maybe longer if you try, and then life continues. But then there are people who do something completely different to you. They enter your life, and somehow the world is no longer arranged the same way. The days may look familiar, the streets may be the same, the sound of your own footsteps may not change at all. But something inside you shifts. Something begins to lean in a direction you cannot explain. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how much distance stands between you, you find yourself pulled back toward the memory of them. That is the strange thing about gravity. You do not see it, you do not hear it coming, it does not ask for permission, it simply exists, quietly, constantly. It reaches across space and holds things in motion. The moon does not need to be reminded to stay close to the earth. The planets do not wake up every morning and decide to continue their path. There is a force beneath the movement, beneath the silence, beneath everything we can see, and sometimes, I think people can be like that too. Sometimes someone becomes an invisible force inside your life. You may try to move away. You may convince yourself that enough time has passed. You may fill your days with noise, conversations, work, new faces, new places. But somewhere beneath all of that, there is still a pull. And maybe that is what you are to me. Not a thought I choose every morning. Not a memory I force myself to hold. You are something quieter than that. Something deeper. You exist in the spaces where words do not always reach. You are there in the pause after a song ends, in the empty seat beside me, in the strange moment when I see something beautiful and, without thinking, wonder what you would say about it. You are there when the night becomes too quiet, and suddenly silence feels less like silence, because somehow it carries the shape of you. I do not know when it happened. Maybe it was not one moment. Maybe there was no single second when everything changed. Maybe that is why it feels so impossible to explain. Some connections do not arrive like lightning. They arrive slowly, almost unnoticed. A conversation, a look, a moment when you realize you have stopped pretending to be completely alone. Then another moment, and another, until one day, you look back and understand that something has been growing inside you without asking for your attention. You became part of the way I see things. And that is a dangerous kind of closeness, because once someone becomes part of your perspective, you cannot simply remove them by closing a door. You cannot erase them by refusing to speak their name. You cannot measure the distance between two souls the same way you measure the distance between two cities. Sometimes two people can stand in the same room and be galaxies apart, and sometimes they can be separated by oceans and still feel impossibly close. I have thought about that. How strange it is that the human heart can ignore geography. How a person can leave a room, leave a city, disappear into another life, and still remain present in the smallest details of your day. You can be surrounded by people and suddenly remember the way one person looked at you. You can hear 100 voices and still recognize the silence left by one. You can tell yourself that life moves forward, and it does, but moving forward does not always mean leaving everything behind. Sometimes it means carrying something with you. Maybe that is what I have been doing without realizing it. Carrying the weight of you, not as a burden, but as a presence. There is a difference. A burden is something you want to put down. A presence is something you notice even when your hands are empty. You are not something I am trying to escape. You are the reason escape does not always make sense, because where exactly would I go? That is the question I keep returning to. If every version of my future still contains the possibility of remembering you, if every quiet place leaves room for the thought of you, if every road I take eventually brings me face to face with something that reminds me of you, then maybe distance was never the answer. Maybe running was never movement at all. Maybe some people are not meant to be outrun. Maybe they are meant to be understood. I used to think being pulled towards someone meant weakness. I thought strength meant being completely untouched, independent, unmoved. I thought the strongest person in the room was the one who needed nothing and no one. But I do not believe that anymore. There is no courage in pretending you feel nothing. There is no freedom in lying to yourself about what matters. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit that someone has changed you, not controlled you, changed you. There is a difference. You can love someone without losing yourself. You can feel their gravity without becoming their prisoner. You can be drawn toward them and still remain your own person. Maybe real connection is not about one soul disappearing inside another. Maybe it is about two complete worlds recognizing that they affect each other, like two stars separate, whole, burning with their own light, and still changing the space around them. That is what you did. You changed the space around me. There are things I notice now that I might have ignored before. Small moments, honest moments, the kind that cannot be posted, explained, or turned into something impressive. A cup of coffee in the morning, rain against a window, the first cold breath of air after a long day, a street at night when almost everyone has gone home. Somehow, when you become important to someone, the world starts collecting pieces that belong to you, not because you are physically there, because the heart has a strange way of making room. And once it makes room, you begin to understand that absence is not always emptiness. Sometimes absence is evidence. Evidence that someone mattered enough to leave a shape behind. You notice the shape when they are gone. You notice it in the places where you expected them to be. You notice it in the sentences you almost send. You notice it when something happens and your first instinct is to turn toward them. That instinct is difficult to explain. Maybe it comes from recognition. Maybe some people feel familiar before you truly know them. Not because you have met before in some story you cannot prove, but because something about them speaks to a part of you that has been waiting for a language. You spend years believing no one understands a certain silence inside you. Then someone appears, and without trying, they stand beside that silence as if they have known it all along. You do not have to explain everything. They see enough, and being seen is a powerful thing. I think we underestimate it. We spend so much of our lives performing, trying to look stronger than we feel, calmer than we are, more certain, more successful, more complete. We learn how to answer questions without giving away the truth. We learn how to smile when we are tired. We learn how to say, I'm fine, in so many different ways that sometimes even we start believing it. Then someone comes along who makes pretending feel unnecessary. That is rare, and rare things have gravity. Because when you have spent a long time feeling like the world only sees the surface of you, the person who notices something deeper becomes difficult to forget. Not because you want to depend on them, not because you expect them to fix you, but because for one honest moment you do not feel like a stranger inside your own life. You feel recognized. Maybe that is why your pull feels so strong. You never had to chase me. You never had to demand my attention. You never had to become louder than the rest of the world. Somehow, in all the noise, you became the quiet thing I kept hearing. And the more I tried to understand it, the more I realized that not everything meaningful can be explained. We are taught to explain everything. We want reasons, evidence, definitions. We want to know why something happened and where it is going. But some of the most important things in life arrive before understanding. You feel them first. A hand you do not want to let go of, a voice that makes a difficult day softer, a presence that changes the temperature of a room, a goodbye that feels heavier than it should. You feel it before you can name it. Maybe love begins there, not in certainty. In recognition, in the moment you realize that someone has become part of the internal map you use to find your way through the world. And maybe that is why I keep finding my way back to you. Not always physically, sometimes only in thought. Sometimes through a memory I did not invite. Sometimes through a dream that disappears the moment I wake up, but leaves behind a feeling I cannot shake. Sometimes through a simple question, how are you? A question that carries more weight than anyone else would understand. How are you? Such ordinary words, and yet when they are meant for someone who matters, they become a doorway. I wonder how your day went. I wonder if you are tired. I wonder if something made you laugh. I wonder if you are carrying something you have not told anyone. I wonder if, somewhere in the middle of your day, the universe placed a small reminder of me in front of you too. Maybe that is selfish. Maybe everyone wants to believe they leave something behind in the people they care about. but I think it is human. We want to know that we mattered not to the world. The world is too large and too distracted. We want to know that we mattered to one person, that somewhere in one human heart, our existence created a difference, and you have created a difference in me. That is the truth I cannot make smaller just because it scares me. I have tried to reduce things before, to make them easier to carry. To call something just a moment when it was more than that. To call someone just a friend when the silence after they left felt too deep for that word. To tell myself I was only curious when I was already attached. To pretend I did not care because caring made me vulnerable. But the truth has its own gravity too. You can push against it, you can turn away, you can build entire walls around it. Eventually, you still feel the pull. So I stopped asking why I could not forget you. Maybe forgetting was never the point. Maybe the point was learning what your presence had awakened in me, because some people do not enter your life to be temporary. They enter to reveal something. They show you how deeply you can feel. They remind you that your heart is still capable of surprise. They make you question the stories you had already written about yourself. I thought I knew what I was capable of feeling, then you appeared. And suddenly there were emotions that did not fit inside my old definitions. There was missing you before I fully understood how much I cared. There was feeling calm simply because you existed somewhere in the world. There was fear, not of you, but of the possibility of losing a connection I had not even known I was searching for. There was gratitude. That one surprised me the most, because even when things are uncertain, even when distance exists, even when there are questions without answers, there is still gratitude for the simple fact that our paths crossed at all. How many people exist in this world? How many lives move beside ours without ever touching them? And somehow, among all of that movement, there was a moment when you became real to me. That feels important, maybe not to the universe, but then again, who knows? Maybe the universe is built from moments like that. Tiny collisions, unexpected meetings, one life touching another and changing its direction by a degree so small no one notices at first. Then years later, you look back and realize that one conversation changed the road you were walking on. Perhaps gravity works like that. Not always violently, sometimes gently, a small pull, then another, until the direction of your life is no longer exactly what it was. You may never notice the exact moment you begin orbiting someone. You simply look up one day and realize you have been carrying their light with you. And still, I do not want to make you into something impossible. I do not want to turn you into a fantasy or place you so high above me that reality can no longer reach you. You are human. You have difficult days. You have fears. You have moments when you are not sure what to say. Maybe you have your own silence that no one understands. Maybe you're trying to find your way just like everyone else. That is part of what makes the pull so real. It is not perfection, it is recognition. I am not drawn to an illusion. I am drawn to the person who exists beneath the performance, the person who can be quiet, the person who can be imperfect, the person who can sit beside me without needing to fill every second with words. There is something beautiful about being able to share silence with someone and not feel alone. That might be one of the strongest forms of gravity there is. When silence does not create distance, when silence becomes a place two people can stand together. I have known people who could talk for hours and still feel far away. And I have known moments with you where almost nothing needed to be said, yet somehow I felt closer than I did in 100 conversations. Words are important, but presence is different. Presence is the thing that remains after the words are gone. Maybe that is why your absence can feel so loud. Because I remember the presence. I remember the feeling of the world becoming quieter in the right way. Not empty, quieter. There is a difference. The kind of quiet where you can finally hear yourself. The kind of quiet where you do not have to defend every feeling. The kind of quiet that makes you realize how tired you were of being understood incorrectly. You have that effect on me. And maybe I am afraid to say it because saying something aloud makes it real in a new way. Once the words exist outside of you, you cannot pretend they were never there. They become part of the world. Someone else can hear them. Someone else can decide what they mean. But I am learning that honesty is worth the risk. So here it is. I feel your pull. I feel it in ways I cannot always explain. I feel it when I am busy, and suddenly everything pauses for half a second because something reminded me of you. I feel it when I see the moon and remember that we are both somewhere beneath the same sky. I feel it when time passes and I expect the feeling to become smaller, only to realize that some things do not fade in the way we expect. They change, they become quieter, deeper. more difficult to deny. Maybe that is what real gravity does. It does not always drag you. Sometimes it simply remains a constant force. You build your life around it without realizing you have adjusted your orbit. And I have adjusted. I think I started doing that the moment you became someone I cared about. I began measuring certain moments differently. Good news felt incomplete until I imagined telling you. Difficult days felt different because I wondered whether you would understand. Beautiful things became more beautiful when I pictured you seeing them too. That is not obsession, it is connection. There is a difference between losing yourself in someone and allowing someone to become meaningful to you. I do not want to own you. I do not want to trap you. I do not want to become the center of your universe. I only want to be honest about the fact that somehow you became one of the forces that changed mine. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps love does not always need a dramatic promise of. Maybe sometimes it is simply this: I am here, I see you, I remember you. Your existence has touched mine, and I cannot honestly pretend it has not. There is something peaceful about that. No chasing, no forcing, no pretending destiny has given us every answer, just acknowledging the pull. Acknowledging that some connections feel larger than the circumstances surrounding them. Maybe we do not know where they will lead. Maybe we are not supposed to know yet. People often ruin beautiful things by demanding an ending before they have fully experienced the beginning. We want guarantees. We want to know how long something will last before we allow ourselves to care. But life does not offer that kind of certainty. The stars do not promise us tomorrow. The ocean does not promise it will look the same every day. The people we love do not come with guarantees. And still, we look at the stars, we stand beside the ocean, we let people matter. Because some things are worth experiencing even when they cannot be controlled. Maybe you are one of those things. Not something I can control, not something I completely understand, but something I would rather feel honestly than deny forever. So if you ever wonder why I keep coming back to you, even in the quiet, even after time has passed, even when life pulls me in 100 different directions, maybe the answer is simple. You became part of the gravity. And gravity does not need an invitation. It simply pulls. It changes the path of everything that comes close enough. Maybe I came close enough to see something in you that I could not unsee. Maybe you came close enough to touch something in me that I had protected for years. Maybe that is why I cannot return to the person I was before you. Not because you took something away, because you revealed something. You reminded me that I can still be moved. That my heart is not as closed as I once believed. That beneath all the caution, all the distance I have learned to keep, all the walls that seem necessary, there is still a part of me capable of being pulled toward another human being, with a force that feels both terrifying and beautiful. And I think that is the part I want you to understand. I am not saying you are responsible for my happiness. You are not. I am still responsible for my own life, my own choices, my own healing, my own direction. But responsibility does not erase connection. Being whole does not mean being untouched. Strength does not mean becoming impossible to reach. Maybe real strength is allowing yourself to be affected without surrendering who you are, and you have affected me, quickly, completely, in ways I continue to discover. Sometimes I think of the universe, the impossible size of it, the distances we cannot imagine, the stars whose light travels for years before reaching our eyes. And in all that space, there are forces holding things together, invisible things, things we cannot touch with our hands. Maybe that is why I do not need to see every reason behind this feeling. Some forces are real even when they are invisible. Some connections exist even when there is distance. Some people continue to matter even when there is silence, and some hearts keep returning to the same place because, somewhere deep inside, they have already learned the shape of the pull. I do not know what tomorrow will ask of us. I do not know how many roads will open, how many will close, how many versions of ourselves we will become before we understand why we met. But right now I know this: when I think of you, something in me moves, not violently, not desperately, just honestly. Like a compass remembering north, like the tide answering the moon, like a planet continuing along a path shaped by something it cannot see. And maybe I have been trying too hard to find a better explanation than that. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe some people are simply magnetic to the soul. Maybe there are connections that cannot be reduced to logic. Maybe the universe has room for mysteries. There are people you can know for years and still feel like strangers. You learn their favorite things, hear their stories, sit beside them, laugh with them, and yet there remains a distance you cannot cross. Then sometimes someone enters your life and the opposite happens. You may barely know them, but something inside you feels strangely familiar. Not because you have all the answers about them, but because your soul seems to recognize a language your mind has only just begun to understand. Time cannot always explain connection. Sometimes a person feels familiar before you have enough memories to call them familiar. You hear their voice, look into their eyes, or sit with them in silence, and something within you says, I know this feeling. Maybe that is why some people are so hard to walk away from. It is not always about how long you have known them, it is about how deeply they have reached you. A few honest moments can sometimes carry more meaning than years of ordinary conversation. And distance has always been misunderstood. Distant can separate hands, but it cannot always separate hearts. Two people can live beneath different skies, wake up in different places, and still somehow exist in each other's thoughts. You cannot measure that connection with miles. You cannot point to it on a map. It lives somewhere deeper. I think some souls recognize each other in ways that time cannot control. Maybe you meet at the wrong moment, but the feeling is still right. Maybe life places obstacles between you, but something inside you refuses to call the connection meaningless. Maybe years pass and you both become different people, yet when you think of them, there is still a quiet part of you that remembers. Not everything important disappears simply because time moves forward. We are taught that time changes everything, and it does change many things. Faces change, places disappear, circumstances move on. But sometimes time does something unexpected. It reveals what was real. When the noise is gone, when the excitement has faded, when life has tested the connection, what remains becomes easier to see. And somehow you remain. That does not mean I am trapped in the past. It does not mean I have stopped living. It simply means that meeting you became part of my life in a way I cannot erase, without erasing a piece of my own journey. Maybe that is what recognition really is. It is not saying, I have known you forever. It is saying somehow, knowing you feels like finding something I didn't realize I had been missing. There is a quiet comfort in being understood without having to explain every part of yourself. There is something rare about meeting a person who does not make you feel like you have to perform. You do not have to be more impressive. You do not have to hide every weakness. You can simply exist, and they still stay. That kind of connection feels bigger than time, because time measures how long something lasts, but it cannot always measure how deeply something reaches. A single moment can stay with you for the rest of your life. A person can speak one sentence at exactly the right time and change the way you see yourself forever. Maybe souls do not count time the way clocks do. Maybe they remember feelings, maybe they remember kindness. Maybe they remember the people who made them feel less alone in a world that can sometimes feel impossibly large. And when I think about you, I wonder if that is why the connection feels so difficult to explain. It feels like something inside me noticed you before I had the words to describe why. I do not know if the universe planned it. I do not know if there is some perfect reason our paths crossed. But I know this, out of all the people I could have met, there was something about you that made me stop. And sometimes, stopping is important. Life moves so quickly. We are always going somewhere, becoming someone, chasing something. Then a person appears, and for a moment you stop running, you pay attention, you listen at more carefully, you look at the world differently because they have entered it. Maybe that is the beginning of recognition, not knowing everything, just knowing that you do not want to look away. You make me believe that some connections are not weakened by distance, because distance only tests what was truly there. If the feeling was shallow, perhaps it disappears. But if it was built somewhere deeper, it learns how to survive without constant proof. It survives in memory, in hope, in the quiet thought that perhaps somewhere the other person remembers too. And maybe one day, time will no longer feel like something standing between us. Maybe we will understand why certain people enter our lives and leave marks that no distance can completely erase. Until then, I will not force an explanation. I will simply respect the mystery of what I feel. Because some souls do not need to be held every day to remain close. Some people do not need to stand beside you to change the direction of your heart, and some connections are so deeply written into who you become that even time, even distance, even an entire universe cannot convince you that what you felt was never real.